Let me begin with a question that many people whisper but rarely say aloud. If heaven lasts forever, won't it eventually become boring? Some imagine heaven as an endless church service, one long song, one long prayer, one long moment stretched so thin that even the saints begin to yawn. But that picture is not heaven. That picture is the result of our limited imagination trying to define an unlimited God. Stay with me, because the truth we uncover in the next few minutes will reshape how you view eternity, how you face suffering, and how you anchor your hope. And the final insight I'll share will make you see heaven not only as your destination, but as your greatest motivation for living today. We fear boredom in heaven because we associate eternity with repetition. In this world, everything we enjoy eventually fades. The best meal ends, the most beautiful song finishes, the most exciting moment passes. But heaven is not simply earth extended. Heaven is earth perfected. Heaven is life without limits. Heaven is joy without interruption. So let's walk through the truths that remove the question mark after the word heaven and replace it with an exclamation point. We misunderstand eternity. We think in earthly terms: hours, days, years, fatigue, decline, and weariness. But boredom exists only where brokenness exists. In heaven, brokenness is gone. Time does not drain you. Joy does not weaken. Experience does not become dull. Eternity is not the extension of time. It is the elevation of life. Heaven is God's masterpiece of creativity. Look around this world. Look at mountains and oceans. Look at galaxies that stretch beyond imagination. Look at colors we still cannot fully define and creatures in the ocean we've never discovered. If God created this world in 6 days, imagine what the home He's preparing for eternity must look like. Heaven will not be less than earth. It will be more, infinitely more. You will be transformed. The you who enters heaven will not be the you who struggles here. No fear, no fatigue, no boredom, no emotional battles draining your joy. A perfect environment for souls perfectly designed. You will have a mind that never grows tired, a heart that never grows restless, a spirit that never grows weary. Heaven is filled with purpose. Heaven is not passive. It is active. It is purposeful. It is fulfilling. You will worship, but worship is not standing still. It is discovery. It is awe. It is the unfolding of God's glory layer after layer, revelation after revelation, each moment deeper than the one before. There will be responsibilities, creative works, joyful service, and divine assignments. Not one moment wasted, not 1 second empty. God's presence makes eternity exciting. Think about the most powerful moment you've ever had in the presence of God on earth. The peace, the clarity, the overwhelming joy. Now imagine that without interruption, without limitation, without distance. Where God is, boredom cannot exist. His presence alone supplies endless wonder. The female trchi all tiong. Heaven answers the deepest ache of the human soul to be fully known, fully loved, fully alive. Heaven is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of the story you were created for. A story without fear, a story without endings, a story without boredom. So when someone asks, won't heaven be boring? The answer is simple. Boredom is impossible when God is the center of eternity. Let me speak to you from the depth of a question many people carry quietly in their hearts. Is heaven really going to be exciting? Or are we misunderstanding eternity altogether? Because the very first reason people fear boredom in heaven is simple. We are thinking about eternity with earthly minds that have been trained by limitations, exhaustion, and repetition. And as long as we use a broken world to define a perfect one, our imagination will always fall short. You see, we live in a world where even the greatest joys fade. A beautiful moment passes, a celebration ends, the excitement of a new day eventually gives way to routine. We are conditioned by calendars, schedules, deadlines, and the constant reminder that time wears us down. And because every earthly pleasure eventually loses its thrill, we assume the same must be true of eternity. But that's where the misunderstanding begins. Let me tell you something. The very thought that heaven could be boring reveals not a flaw in heaven, but a flaw in how we imagine it. We are trying to fit the eternal into a container built for the temporary. We are trying to describe the sunrise with the language of the night. And that is why we must stop thinking of heaven through the lens of our limited experiences. Imagine for a moment that you had never heard music before. No melody, no rhythm, no harmony. If someone tried to explain music to you, you might picture noise, chaos, or confusion. Why? Because you would be imagining something you've never experienced through the only experiences you know. That is exactly why some people find the idea of heaven unclear, because they are trying to describe the unfamiliar with the language of the familiar. In this world, boredom comes from emptiness, fatigue, and repetition. But boredom cannot exist in a place where none of those things exist. Boredom requires limits. Heaven contains none. Boredom requires decay. Heaven knows no decay. Boredom grows out of a heart that has known disappointment, a life that has been drained by responsibility, and a body that grows weary. But all of that will be left behind the moment we step into eternity. Picture it now: a mind that never grows tired, a heart that never loses its wonder, a spirit that never drops into discouragement. The very structure of who we will be is transformed. You won't be limited by the weaknesses you feel today, the frustration, the monotony, the heaviness of routine, all of it set aside once and for all. We misunderstand eternity because we think of it as endless time, but eternity isn't time stretched out. Eternity is life lifted up. It is existence without the boundaries that exhaust us. It is living without watching the clock, loving without fear of loss, growing without fear of decline. Let me tell you something deeply important. Heaven is not the extension of this world. Heaven is the correction of it. Everything that drains life here is absent there. Everything that weakens joy here is removed there. And everything that makes life meaningful here is magnified there, multiplied beyond measure. So when people ask, won't eternity get repetitive? I remind them repetition exists only where creativity ends. And the God who designed this universe has never repeated himself. No sunrise is identical. No snowflake is alike. No person is replicated. If creation on this side of eternity is this diverse, imagine what his eternal world will be like. When you understand that, the question isn't, will heaven be boring? The real question becomes, how could it possibly be? Let me draw your attention to something we often overlook. The God who designed this world, this breathtaking, overflowing, soaked world, is the same God who designed heaven. If creation on this side of eternity leaves us speechless, imagine what awaits us on the other side. And yet some people still fear heaven might feel empty or monotonous, simply because they've forgotten the creative mind behind it. Think about this: every sunrise that paints the sky differently, every mountain carved with its own unique fingerprint, every ocean that moves with rhythm and power, none of these things were accidents. They were designed by a creator whose imagination is endless. Now, if he poured this much beauty into a temporary, fallen world, what must his eternal masterpiece look like? Sometimes we talk about heaven as though it were a quiet room with white walls, no color, no movement, no excitement. But that picture doesn't match the God who made galaxies on a Tuesday and filled oceans with creatures we still haven't discovered. That picture doesn't match the God who wrapped light around the earth, who scattered stars like diamonds, who shaped continents with his voice. He is not boring. His creation is not boring, and the home he is preparing is beyond anything we've seen or imagined. Let me ask you something. Have you ever stood in front of a waterfall and felt so small? Have you ever watched the night sky and realized how vast it all is? Have you ever looked at a child's laughter, a sunset's glow, a blooming garden, and thought, this could not have come from anywhere except the hands of a brilliant God? If such beauty exists here, in a world damaged by sin, imagine the intensity of beauty in a place untouched by it. Heaven is not a downgrade from earth. Heaven is not plain. Heaven is not empty. Heaven is creation at full strength, creation with no shadows, no limits, no decay. You haven't heard true music until you hear it in heaven. You haven't seen true color until you see it there. You haven't tasted true joy until you taste it there. Every sense will be awakened, magnified, sharpened. Every experience will be richer, deeper, fuller. The creativity of God is not something He used up during the 6 days of creation. It is who He is. Creativity flows from Him as naturally as light flows from the sun. And if this world, which is only His preliminary sketch, is this magnificent, then heaven is His completed masterpiece. Think about the diversity of this planet. Forests thick with mystery, oceans roaring with life, deserts glowing with golden dunes, icebergs sculpted like frozen cathedrals. If each corner of this broken world carries its own story, its own personality, its own wonder, then heaven will be a symphony of wonders that never end. Let this thought shake your heart awake. God does not create boring things. He never has. He never will. And He has spent eternity preparing a place that fully reflects His beauty, His brilliance, His imagination. Heaven is not repetition, it is revelation. Not a single moment will feel recycled. No sight will feel familiar. No experience will lose its wonder. The God who sketched butterflies and galaxies has designed your eternal home. And when you finally see it, you will realize this was the world your soul was created for. And if the God who shaped such a world, temporary, fragile, incomplete, poured this much beauty into it, then imagine the kind of you He is preparing for the world to come. Because the wonder of heaven is not only the place itself, it is the transformation of the people who will live there. The environment will be glorious, yes, but you will be changed in a way that makes glory not only visible but fully enjoyable. Right now, your capacity for joy is limited. Your mind gets tired. Your emotions get overwhelmed. Your body wears out. Even the most spectacular moment you've ever experienced fades because you simply cannot sustain wonder for long in your current earthly state. It's not that joy disappears, it's that you run out of strength to hold it. But in heaven, you will not be who you are right now. Let me paint this for you. Imagine a heart that never grows heavy, a mind that never grows foggy, a body that never grows weak. Imagine waking up, if waking up even exists there, with perfect clarity, perfect energy, and perfect enthusiasm. Not the kind of enthusiasm that sparks and fades, but the kind that burns steady without dimming. For the first time in your existence, everything inside you will function exactly the way God intended. No anxiety pulling you down, no discouragement whispering lies, no insecurity clouding your thoughts, no exhaustion draining the joy out of your moments. You will be a fully awakened being, capable of experiencing the beauty of heaven without a single ounce of limitation. Here on earth, we can stand before a stunning landscape and feel overwhelmed, but that moment eventually slips away. Our minds can't hold it. Our hearts can't sustain it. Our bodies can't handle it. We grow tired even in joy. But in heaven, joy will never be too much for you. Glory will never overwhelm you. Beauty will never exhaust you. Why? Because you will be remade, perfectly aligned, perfectly tuned, perfectly capable of eternal wonder. Think about how easily we become bored now. Not because the world is boring, but because our hearts become numb. Not because life lacks beauty, but because repetition and weariness dull our senses. Heaven removes all of that. Every part of you will be renewed to experience life at its highest level without the filters, fears, or failures that limit you today. Imagine emotions without pain. Imagine intellect without confusion. Imagine desires without temptation. Imagine energy without decline. Imagine existence without decay. This is not imagination. It is the promise of transformation. In heaven, you won't struggle to pay attention. You won't fight distraction. You won't feel restless. You won't wonder when the moment will end or when joy will fade. You will have the capacity to experience wonder continuously, deeply, endlessly. And here is the powerful truth behind it all. Heaven is enjoyable because you will be fully capable of enjoying it. The place is extraordinary, but the person God makes you will be equally extraordinary. Everything that makes life difficult here, your weaknesses, your wounds, your limits, will be completely gone. For the first time ever, you will be exactly who you were created to be, capable of delight without end, capable of worship without weariness, capable of wonder without interruption, capable of joy without fading, capable of joy without fading. And when you step into that kind of existence, whole, renewed, overflowing, you will finally understand why heaven is not a passive place of stillness, but a vibrant realm filled with purpose, depth, movement, and divine activity. Because a transformed you requires a transformed life to live in, and heaven is exactly that. Let me tell you something that may surprise you. Heaven is not a retirement home for tired souls. It is the beginning of a life so rich, so meaningful, and so purpose-filled that every moment draws you deeper into the heart of God. The idea that heaven is simply singing on a cloud shows how little we've grasped about the plans God has for His people. You were created for purpose. You were shaped for responsibility. You were designed for meaningful engagement. And heaven does not remove those things, it redeems them. Imagine this, not the stress of earthly responsibilities, but the joy of heavenly assignments. Not tasks that wear you down, but tasks that lift you higher. Work that doesn't drain you, work that fulfills you. Service that doesn't exhaust you, service that energizes you. Worship that doesn't require effort. Worship that flows naturally from a heart overwhelmed by glory. Here on earth, even the things we love doing can tire us out. Even the things we enjoy require recovery. But in heaven, what you do will perfectly match who you are. Your purpose will align with your passion. Your assignments will align with your abilities. Your service will align with your joy. Now imagine worship not as a repetitive activity, but as an eternal unfolding of God's greatness. Worship in heaven is discovery. Every moment another dimension of who God is revealed. Every revelation ignites new awe. Every spark of awe becomes fuel for deeper worship. It is not one long song. It is endless wonder expressed through praise. But heaven's purpose goes beyond worship. Heaven is filled with exploration. The God who made billions of galaxies did not run out of creativity after He created Earth. There will be realms of beauty to explore, dimensions of glory to witness, mysteries of God's design waiting to be uncovered. You will not walk through heaven with nothing to do. You will walk through heaven with everything to look forward to. Think of relationships in heaven, meaningful, rich, deep. Think of conversations with saints of old, learning their stories, hearing wisdom shaped by eternity. Think of diving deeper into truth, discovering spiritual realities that were too vast for your earthly mind to comprehend. Every moment will offer something to learn, something to experience, something to celebrate. And let me tell you, purpose in heaven is not only eternal, it is personal. God Himself crafted roles for you. He prepared assignments with your name written on them, not because He needs your help, but because He delights in your participation. He invites you into His ongoing, eternal work. The adventure of heaven is not passive, it is profoundly active. The joy of heaven is not idle, it is deeply engaging. The life of heaven is not repetitive, it is eternally unfolding. Every step, every task, every encounter will move you further into purpose, deeper into joy, and higher into the life you were always meant to live. Higher into the life you were always meant to live. And all of that, every assignment, every discovery, every moment of purpose flows from one reality that stands at the center of heaven, the presence of God Himself. Because if purpose gives heaven its activity, it is God's presence that gives heaven its awe. Everything else is simply an overflow of being near Him. Let me tell you something that shakes the heart awake. We have never experienced God's presence in its fullness. Not once. Not even on our most anointed day. Not when the tears streamed down our face during worship. Not even in those sacred moments when we felt Him so close we could barely breathe. Here on earth, His presence comes to us filtered through our limited bodies, our weak emotions, our imperfect understanding. As powerful as those moments are, they are only a shadow of the real thing. In heaven, that filter is removed. Imagine standing in the presence of the one who created light, not just seeing light, but standing before its creator. Imagine hearing the voice that spoke galaxies into existence, not as an echo, but as a living sound that fills the very atmosphere. Imagine being enveloped in a love so pure, so overwhelming, so all-consuming that every doubt, every fear, every scar you carried simply dissolves in an instant. Here on earth, God's presence brings peace that passes understanding. In heaven, His presence will bring joy that surpasses existence. Peace won't just calm you, it will define you. Joy won't just lift you, it will sustain you. Glory won't just surround you, it will breathe through you. Every part of heaven draws its excitement, its beauty, its purpose from Him. He is the light that fills the city. He is the joy that floods its people. He is the center from which all wonder flows. Think about how one moment with God on earth can change your heart, restore your hope, or break the chains of fear. Think about how a single whisper from God can direct your life. Now imagine living in that presence continuously, not in moments, not in visitations, not in glimpses, but in fullness. No distance, no delay, no separation. Here, His presence is something we seek. There, His presence is something we breathe. Every revelation of who He is will ignite new awe within you. And because God is infinite, His glory is infinite. That means you will never reach a point where you've seen everything there is to see. You will never arrive at a moment where you say, I understand all of Him. Every experience will open a new doorway into His nature. Every glimpse of His glory will lead to another layer, another dimension, another wonder. And with every revelation, your joy will increase, your worship will deepen, your excitement will grow, not because heaven changes, but because God reveals more of Himself. And He never runs out of majesty. He never reaches a limit. He never repeats Himself. This is why heaven cannot be boring. The presence of God is the greatest thrill the soul can ever know. It is the eternal spark that will keep your heart blazing with wonder forever. Everything in heaven, every sound, every color, every purpose flows from that presence, and every moment in that presence will awaken you in ways you never knew were possible. Every moment in that presence will awaken you in ways you never knew were possible. And the beauty of that awakening is this: the more God reveals of Himself, the more heaven expands before you. Because the presence of God does not bring you to a finish line, it brings you to a beginning. Every revelation becomes an invitation. Every glimpse becomes a doorway. Every moment becomes the start of something greater. That's why heaven is a place of endless discovery. Here on earth, we reach the limits of learning. Our minds get full. Our bodies grow tired. Our memory fades. Even curiosity has an expiration date. But in heaven, curiosity will not be a burden. It will be a blessing. Learning will not be a task. It will be a thrill. Discovery will not be something you chase. It will be something that meets you every single moment. Just imagine in a mind no longer clouded by confusion, a heart no longer weighed down by doubt, an understanding no longer hindered by fear. You will see with perfect clarity, learn with perfect capacity, and explore with perfect joy. For the first time, you will be able to comprehend the depth of truth without limitation. Here we grapple with mysteries. Their mysteries will unfold before us like a flower opening in the morning light. Think of the vastness of God's creation. Billions of galaxies stretched across the heavens. Realms and realities we know nothing about. Spiritual truths too deep for earthly language. And in heaven, all of it becomes a place of exploration. Not once, not occasionally, but continually. There will never come a day when you say, I've seen it all. There will never be a moment when you run out of wonder. Every discovery will lead to another. Every revelation will spark new curiosity. Every answered question will open the door to 1,000 more. Imagine walking through the wonders of God with a mind that never tires. Imagine exploring the depths of truth with a heart that never fears. Imagine learning, not because you must, but because it fills you with joy. Learning in heaven will feel like worship. Discovery will feel like praise. Understanding will feel like delight. And the greatest part, you will not explore alone. You will learn alongside saints who walked the earth before you, believers, prophets, disciples, heroes of faith. Conversations will be rich with revelation. Fellowship will be filled with wisdom. Every interaction will deepen your understanding of God's greatness. Picture yourself asking Moses about the Red Sea, or David about facing Goliath, or Paul about that moment on the Damascus road. But even those conversations will not compare to learning directly from God himself, truth spoken not in parables or shadows, but in clarity and glory. And let me say this clearly, the God who created infinite galaxies did not intend for his children to stop exploring after death. Heaven is the beginning of exploration, not the end. Adventure is not behind you, it is before you. Curiosity is not something you outgrow, it is something you grow into. As God reveals new depths of his glory, new layers of his wisdom, new expressions of his creativity, you will find yourself drawn deeper and deeper into an eternal journey, one where wonder never fades, joy never lessens, and discovery never ends. Because in heaven, learning is not a process, it is an experience of God himself. Of course, here is the seventh keynote expanded in 500 words in direct speech in the style of David Jeremiah without mentioning him, no heading, no ending statement, and starting seamlessly from where the previous keynote's expansion ended, continuing the same flow and tone. And when you begin to recognize that, something remarkable happens inside you. Your perspective shifts, your heart steadies, and suddenly you're able to see what you could never see before. And that leads us into this next truth, because once God teaches you to stand firm, he also teaches you to see beyond the surface. He trains your spiritual eyes to look past what's visible and understand what's really unfolding behind the scenes. You see, so many people live only by what they can touch, measure, or calculate. But faith invites you to look deeper. Faith invites you to observe what the natural eye cannot capture. And if you're going to walk confidently through the battles of your life, you must be willing to look with the eyes of your spirit. Because often what you see on the surface is only the outer frame of a much larger picture God is painting. Think about it, the disciples saw a storm, but Jesus saw an opportunity to reveal authority. Elijah's servants saw an army surrounding the city, but the prophet saw chariots of fire stationed on every hilltop. Daniel saw a lion's den, but heaven saw angels already preparing to shut every mouth. And you may be staring at something right now that looks impossible, overwhelming, immovable. But what if the thing that frightens you is actually the very place where God is positioning you to witness his power? When the enemy tries to intimidate you with what you can see, God whispers courage by reminding you of what he sees. And his view is never limited, never obstructed, never uncertain. While you're looking at the closed door, he's seeing the corridor that leads beyond it. While you're staring at the obstacle, he's already charting the path through it. While you're counting the resources you lack, he's calculating the supply he's about to release. And this is why I urge you, don't judge your future by the snapshot you're living in today. Don't define God's plan by the chaos that surrounds you. Don't assume that the scene you're standing in right now is the final scene of your story. God specializes in working behind layers that the human eye cannot penetrate. And if you're patient enough, faithful enough, and quiet enough to listen, he will show you glimpses of his handiwork long before the full picture becomes clear. You may not understand why certain doors closed, but perhaps they shut to protect you from what you never saw coming. You may not know why certain people walked away, but maybe their absence created the space for God to send those who will walk with you into the next chapter. You may not comprehend why the season you're in feels slow, heavy, or silent, but silence is often the workshop of divine construction. So lift your eyes, not in fear, but in expectation, not in defeat, but in anticipation. Because what you're seeing right now is only the outer shell of a supernatural story God is writing beneath the surface. And if you dare to look with faith, you will begin to notice subtle movements, gentle shifts, small signs, evidence that God is closer, wiser, and more active than you ever imagined. When you begin to notice those subtle movements, those gentle shifts, something awakens in your spirit that you didn't realize had grown dim. Hope begins to rise, not loud, not dramatic, but steady, like the first light of morning breaking through a long night. And that is where this next truth unfolds, because once God trains your eyes to see beyond the surface, He also strengthens your heart to move forward even when you don't have all the answers. You see, far too many people delay obedience because they're waiting for absolute clarity, perfect conditions, or a detailed map. But God rarely hands out maps. He gives steps. He gives nudges. He gives direction one moment at a time. And if you ever want to experience the fullness of His plan, you must be willing to walk even when you cannot trace every turn or predict every outcome. Think of Abraham. He wasn't given coordinates. He was given a call. Think of Moses. He wasn't handed an escape route. He was told to stretch out his staff. Think of Peter. He didn't receive walking lessons for water. He simply heard, "Come." And you, standing where you are today, may feel unqualified, unprepared, uncertain. But uncertainty has never been a barrier for God. It only becomes a barrier for us when we allow fear to interpret what faith is meant to understand. Faith doesn't wait for the whole staircase to appear before taking the first step. Faith walks because it trusts the one who carved the steps long before you ever needed them. And isn't it something how God will often allow you to reach a point where the next step feels uncomfortable, unfamiliar, or even risky, not because He wants to trouble you, but because He wants to stretch you. Growth doesn't happen on the familiar road. Miracles don't occur in the shallow water. Breakthroughs aren't born in comfort zones. They emerge when you decide to move forward despite not having all the information, despite not knowing how God will work it out, despite not seeing the outcome. And here's the beautiful part. Once you take that step, just one, you begin to realize that God was already preparing the ground beneath your feet. You begin to notice that the path you feared is actually the pathway where His presence becomes more real, more intimate, more undeniable. With each step, your confidence stops depending on what you understand and starts depending on who walks beside you. And in that process, God begins to remove the weight of what you've been carrying. He lifts the burden of needing to control every outcome. He frees you from the anxiety of trying to predict the future. He releases you from the paralysis that comes from overthinking. Because the moment you move forward in faith, you declare, without words, that God is trustworthy. You may not know how the pieces fit, but He does. You may not see how the story resolves, but He does. You may not feel ready, but He knows you are. And when you take that step, even trembling, even unsure, something powerful happens. Heaven responds to movement. God honors motion. Doors begin to open. Resources begin to align. Strength begins to rise. And what once felt impossible suddenly becomes the very arena where God's power chooses to manifest. So keep moving, not because you understand everything, but because you trust the one who does.